Do you want to first show them? So like a lot of religions, we also adorn our holy book, and this is how we do that. So you'll see there's some nice like matching fabrics and everything. This is called a jandoa. Not super important to know, but there's that information. Yeah, if you want to go closer so they can see it, you'll see that this holy book, this Simrnjit Seerha, is written in the script, but the word that the script is written in might be other languages. Kind of a lot like English, but there's a compilation of a lot of different languages as well.
Continue.
I don't know if it's touched. Okay, we can just move it along so you can all see. So it looks like, oh, that's it. You should look them.
Okay. What is this for? It's culture. We do.
So back in the old day when the guru was an actual person, they're sitting in like 90-degree weather, they're sitting in swamps, they're sitting on mountains or whatever. So the weather is typically hot, a lot of bugs. So that was actually used for kings back in the day. It's like a fan to swat away bugs. So this is more of a symbolic thing that we treat even this knowledge with the same respect as a king. You'll see a lot of the things that we do in Sikhi is symbolic, and it's at a basis of equality, and that's why we show certain respects in certain ways. So we'll get into that conversation downstairs too. Cool. So then we'll just head downstairs and get into it. Oh yeah, and if you're like walking away, it's like, I know it's awkward where you're like, whoa, but if you're walking away, you're okay. Yeah, you don't have to walk backwards. Sometimes people will do 2 steps backwards and they'll be like, okay, cool. Yes, right over here.
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ
Can you tell people these are the bathrooms? Otherwise, they're the bathrooms.
All right, so thank you guys for all coming today. We're just going to share a little bit about Sikhi. And so we'll start with, it's an outline of what we plan to talk about. So we'll discuss who we are first, and then give you a little bit of background on the religion, and then a little bit more about what we believe in, some of the core principles, and some identifiers that are unique to our religion, and then also kind of go through what to expect today if you plan to stay afterwards, and then we'll also have time for questions. All right, so that's me on the left. I think it's your left. My name is Akam. That's really all I have to say. I graduated from UW last year, so I grew up in Madison. So me and Simran are the same age, so we both grew up here, come here pretty regularly with our family. So that's how we met.
I am Preet. I'm on the opposite side. And then Akam and I are sisters, and I still go to Memorial High School.
Yeah. My name is Simrnjit Seerha, and I graduated from American University this year. It's in DC, but Corona, so it was online. I was here since March. Yeah, so we have the phonetic spellings, and if you need us to repeat our names, that's totally fine. Okay.
Alright, and then this will be the background and like history of the religion. So what is Sikhi? It was founded by Guru Nanak Dev Ji in the 15th century in Punjab, India. And that is the red section in the map right here. And then we have 10 gurus. And guru is pretty much just an influential teacher or like a popular expert. And so in Sikhism, the gurus are considered to be our teachers of the religion, and they guide us through lessons, and we apply those to our lives. And so we have 10 gurus right
So we have 10 gurus, but after our last guru, Guru Gobind Singh Ji, a like kind of, I don't know, eternal maybe, like a never-ending guru was assigned. So it's our current guru is the Guru Granth Sahib Ji, and that's what you saw upstairs. That's the equivalent of our holy book. All of the knowledge is in there, and we treat it with as much respect as we would a living guru. And so we talked about it a little bit upstairs too, but this was compiled by many different saints from many different religions, and therefore it's in a lot of different languages as well. And yeah, so you guys saw it upstairs, but that's what all the kirtan, which the singing is from as well, and everything that they'll be reading is pretty much from this book. Next, we'll talk a little bit more about our beliefs and what we believe in. So our key principles, we have 3 key principles. The first one is Ban Chakna, which is just about how, kind of giving back to your community and sharing as much as you can. And so that's one of our main principles. Another one is Kirt Karna, which is about living honestly and, I guess kind of just like in general being ethical and living honestly, not exploiting others. And then our last main one is called Nam Japna, which is meditating upon the name of God. Another principle that we strive for is Chardi Kala, which is optimistic resilience. And we'll get into a little bit more about where that came from on the next slide.
Right, and that's why we wanted to include what Jardikala is, which is like ever-rising spirits, optimistic resilience, because Sikhi was founded in social justice principles. So as you can imagine, when you're working in the social justice sphere, it can be very depressing. So it's a very important thing to be in ever-rising spirits and remind yourself that you're fighting the good fight. You're continuing to do what is needed. So a couple of key reasons why we say that it was founded in social justice is because Sikhi was a force for women's rights. Just a couple of examples of what that might mean is there was a practice called sati in India. This is the 15th century still, where if your husband died, they would also kill you. So you would have to die with your husband. And, obviously that completely invalidates a woman's purpose. It's beyond being a wife. So I believe on there, Guru Amar Das Ji was like, we're not going to do this anymore. Women have a higher purpose than serving men in their lives. So that became abolished. Obviously, there are some places even around the world that still don't have complete women's rights. But Sikhi is rooted in having equality between genders. And then another example of women's rights would be leadership positions. Women can hold any position that a man can hold. Being like a priest or so say, we don't really have a formal priest title. It's not like you have to go to a certain amount of school, but women can hold that position in the sense of running the congregation. They can sing hymns, they can do that. Of course, there are cultural influences that can put different divides between economic classes or castes or whatever, but in the religion, there is equality for sure. And then the next reason why it's social justice is a pillar is economic equality. So this goes hand in hand with caste, but even a little bit separate is when we have members of our community that are homeless or that cannot afford food. They are welcome to the Gurdwara and in fact encouraged to come to the Gurdwara to get food because nobody should be hungry. This concept of langar in America is more, well, I guess in Western countries is more, a certain time or it's given, only on Sundays. But in India, most Gurdwaras are always making food and you can walk in at any time and have food because the concept is that no one should be hungry. Langar translates, well, it doesn't actually translate to anything in English. Langar just means food. But people will say like free kitchen in a sense so that it's understood that everyone deserves to eat. And then the next one, the reason why I said caste and economic equality go hand in hand is because your caste, it can be determined by your profession. So there'll be certain people who are just born into the profession of not having a job, or they're born into a profession of being a servant, or they're born into the profession of being a farmer. So that can create this generational wealth, or in some cases, lack of wealth. So that's why they kind of go hand in hand. But even separate of that, in India, even today, is a lot of casteism. And what that means is that people won't talk to each other based off of that person's caste. But in Sikhi, every single guru, especially Guru Nanak Dev Ji, the first guru, said that we're not going to do that anymore. This is ridiculous. Caste, first of all, shouldn't be a thing. You should be able to do whatever you want, regardless of your family's profession. But most importantly, everyone is the same. Everyone has the light of God in them. So why are we treating each other different? So that's definitely important. And then religious equality. So Sikhi does not just fight for its own religious equality of, being able to be a religion, but it also fights for others. Little bit of context is when Sikhi first became a religion back in the 15th century, as it gained traction, leaders, whether they be Hindu or whether they be Muslim, not representative of their religions, more representative of their own egos, were mad that another religion is gaining traction. So they would say, like, okay, for a head of a Sikh, like in today's money, $1,000. But I mean, obviously it's in rupees or whatever was happening at the time. But the point is that you could get money for bringing. You just say stuff and stuff. But you could get money for bringing, like maybe a Sikh woman and be like, okay, well, sell her somewhere or whatever. So there was a lot of religious inequality, but at the same time, there was inequality for other religions as well. For example, the Mughal Empire. This is an empire coming from more of like the Afghanistan region. When they came into India and conquered a lot of land and established their empire, they happened to be Muslim. So again, not representative of their religion, but rather their egos. They were like, everyone has to be Muslim. And they just slaughtered tens of thousands of people at a time. So that was another point in which Sikh individuals were encouraged to stand up for other people. We'll get into what does it mean to stand up for other people when we talk about the Panchakars. And lastly, I know you're like trying to like, whoa, I'm gonna be getting there. Protesting is the last one. So like standing up for other people's rights, really taking a stand. Current day, what does that look like? It looks like protesting. So if you're not familiar, there is a huge protest going on in India, and it's been going on since November.
Yeah.
I don't even know how long at this point. It's for the rights of farmers. So a lot of Punjabi individuals, a lot of Sikhs tend to be Punjabi. They are farmers by trade. And that's unfortunate because these new laws are incredibly oppressive towards them economically. It's essentially going to make it impossible to make money. So they are protesting that. So that's kind of a current day form we wanted to include. So we're not really fighting wars for religious equality anymore. Well, metaphorically, but not physically. We know the next one. Cool. And then we wanted to kind of give a little bit of a general overview, like, okay, well, you keep on talking about this God. What does this God look like? Well, honestly, I don't know, because it doesn't have a form. It doesn't have a gender. It doesn't have a shape. It doesn't have anything. It feels weird to say. So people typically, you'll see on the translations, people use the pronouns he, him for God, but God doesn't have a gender, so it doesn't really matter. They could have done she, hers, or it just feels odd. But I guess the best word to describe what Sikhs believe in would be pantheism. I believe that's how you say it. It's, where you believe that, God is the universe, God is the creator, but simultaneously within its creation. So that's what Sikhs believe in. Not necessarily that there is a old person sitting in the sky, or if it's more so that everyone has God in them. Everything, plants included, animals, everything is God's creation, while simultaneously being it. I think the best metaphor that somebody had told me is it's like how a dance is not a dance without the dancer, but a dancer is not a dancer unless they're dancing, if that makes sense. A dancer and the dance simultaneously need to occur to both have their titles. Maybe that was more confusing than sounded better when they said it. Okay, the next one. Okay, I think.
Alright, and then we're doing identifiers of what a Sikh person may look like. And so this is a bug. A lot of men wear it, but you can occasionally see women with one too. A lot of people call it a turban here. So that's what it looks like. And then these are our 5Ks, which is just 5 identifiers that many Sikhs have. And one is a kara, which is a metal bracelet you often see, like Simran has it. Yeah, it's right there. And then kesh, which is hair. That means like uncut and like well-kept hair. And then kanga, which is a comb that many people have. And then the kashera, which is undergarments. And then the last is kirpan, which is like a handheld sword. It's often like less common now because of security reasons and things like that, but it's become smaller too as well.
It's also not very
So
sharp
now
at
these
all.
days we wear it as a symbolic, but it used to be a 3 foot.
When you fly,
We don't need 3 foot. we
You
can
actually
fly with it.
well, you can.
Yeah, you
But
can
no,
take it
not-
on
not
flights
with this.
now. I think it's just
with not with any in Canada you can.
Yeah, in Canada.
In Canada you can.
I think
I was
otherwise,
gonna say.
yeah, usually put in like a check bag.
Yeah.
right.
That's everybody.
Yes. And we can also talk about, I mean, this looks different. You'll find a lot of people maybe still identify as Sikh, but don't necessarily have all 5Ks. And I think that's also just, you know, with time, how people are choosing to practice it or choosing to
It's okay.
identify. So that looks differently today, but you will probably notice a
You're
lot
just
of
gonna get it.
Yeah, and that's probably something I should have mentioned earlier. So Sikhi is kind of fluid, yet simultaneously not, in the sense that
The answer to the dance.
dancing the dance, you know, that kind of vibe. In the sense that a lot of people who practice Sikhi might take it more seriously or more orthodox in a sense, where they're very strict with everything, and they, you know, they don't leave the house without their 5Ks, the Panch Kakars, which just means 5 things. They might not leave the house, or they may, you know, be a lot more strict. But some people may not be as strict, but they feel just as spiritual. So it's in that sense that it's not a situation where just because you don't have one, you're not sick. Right. And you also see in the Gurbani, which is the word of the gurus, this hymns is also called Gurbani. They sing a lot in poetry, so it's not like you need to do this, you need to do that. It's more like be like the ocean in this way and that. So
Right. Everything
more
is
dancer the dance stuff.
self-interpreted. Yeah.
I think also a lot of the fluidity comes from the fact that it is, I mean, it still feels like a long time ago, 15th century, but I mean, compared to other religions, it's sort of more of a newer religion, I would say. And so I think that kind of allowed for more fluidity to be adapted. And of course, as time passes, I think Sikhs choose to also practice a little bit differently from each other.
So you could see 6 without any of these as well.
Okay, facts and figures. So just to give some numbers, I guess, to put into perspective, sort of, you know, what the Sikh population looks like, you'll see this map, and red is like higher Sikh population, so areas where there's just more or less. And of course you'll see India is still the main one and also highly concentrated in Punjab. In the context of India, Sikhs are still a minority. They've always been a minority in India. So I think that's interesting to keep in mind. The majority there is Hindu. But then you can also see, you know, a lot of people have immigrated. So it's Western countries like the UK, Canada, USA still have a large population and also increasing, especially in urban areas, you know, maybe where they can find more of a sense of community and have other family members or friends that have already immigrated there. So then numbers, this looks like a lot of zeros, about 20 to 23 million Sikhs in India. And then the second highest is the US at 700,000. So you can still see there's quite a big jump between, you know, the most Sikh population country and then the second one And then Canada's a third with 500,000, I believe. So.
Cool. And then we wanted to just finish up by explaining for anybody who wanted to stay for the rest of the service. I don't even know another word I could use for service. Schedule.
You're right.
It's not like
Program?
program for the rest of the program, I guess.
Congregation.
That's what Indian people
The congregation, right? If you wanted to stay, what to expect. So today is Guru Arjan Dev Ji's Shahidi, and fifth Guru, which Shahidi means martyrdom. And that was today, back in the 16th century.
Yep.
Yes, like that. The 16th century, and he became a martyr because of for religious freedom as well. As Sikhi was gaining traction, at that time the Mughal emperor was like, "You need to die. You need to leave." But that did not obviously harm the Sikh cause because we're still here today. But he was, it's actually quite horrific the ways that they would kill Sikhs. So they put him on a hot plate.
The reason for killing him was fifth Guru compiled most of the Guru Granth Sahib.
Yeah, he started
When
that
he
process.
compiled it, then a Mughal emperor didn't like that. Then they wanted to kill him, but they didn't want to have his blood on the ground. You know, in the old days, they said if a rebel gets blood on the ground, then that gets a lot of damage done to the kingdom. So that's how they heated him up on the heat, so his blood gets dry. Then when he got the burns, then they threw him in water, in the river. So that's how they did that. But there was more reason for that too. Few other reasons, but
And you have
this
to
was
like
the main-
imagine this is around July in India. So it's
It was
really
June.
hot. June, July, well, it's the lunar calendar.
It's a hardest in that area.
Yeah, so that's why these, it's kind of like a tradition to have shabio. It's this pink drink you'll see outside. It's really tasty. It tastes like roses and sugar. So feel free to have that as well. I think it's just water, milk, and rose syrup with more sugar. But yeah, so that's kind of why there'll be a lot more people than there typically are. People from Beaver Dam are coming. People from Stevens Point come because this is probably the closest Gurdwara for them. So that's what we wanted to say. And then for the
Will everything's happening during the service related to his martyrdom?
they'll talk about it, and all the hymns that are going to be sung will probably relate to him. Either be his Bani, like his hymns that he wrote, or they'll be of him. So yeah, a general schedule of what happens is around like 11:30, they'll start doing kirtan, which is the Sikh hymns. You hear that right
It's happening
now.
right now.
Yeah.
It'll be going through up to 1 o'clock today.
Mhm.
Normally it's 12:40.
Right.
But today we'll have little extra
A
time.
little extra
Then
time.
after that it would be a.
Then they do a Nand Sahib, which is kind of signifying that they're wrapping up. It also, Anand means like bliss, so it's kind of like puts you in a good mood then. And then they'll read from the holy book for that day. So you'll see everyone, so everyone will be, so this is more logistical, just to know. You'll be sitting, and then once you hear Nand Sahib, everyone is like singing because everyone knows it. And then you'll see everyone stand, and they're standing because they're doing ardas. Ardas means to, ask for something. It's more of you kind of say like, thank you for this, thank you for that. You remember all of the occurrences that have happened, your history. And then you'll see everyone matha tek, then they'll come back up and they'll do a little bit more of ardas, then they'll matha tek again and they'll sit. And then they'll read from the holy book. And then they will give prashad, which is flour, sugar, and butter. It's really tasty. It's like an offering, but it's not an offering in the sense of like you're accepting anything. It's more of like you're eating the food of the Gurdwara, and it's been blessed. So yeah. And then we have langar, which is the food downstairs. But today it's special that langar is probably already going to be served at like 11 now.
Yeah.
So if you guys wanna, if you need to leave, and you're like, oh, but I really want longer, like pasta is probably ready.
Yeah, you're welcome to stay, or you're welcome to come any other Sunday.
Yeah.
Uh,
Now you know
it's
what's up.
always open for everybody, anybody and everybody. It's not like, you have to be a member, you have to be Sikh. Everybody is Sikh. Sikh means learner.
Yeah. That was
The meaning of Sikh is a learner. We are all learning. And when baptized like myself, then becomes Khalsa.
Yeah.
It's called Khalsa.
And to be baptized is a
Yeah.
choice too. Cool. So we have like 20 formal minutes, but we're here for like a couple hours. So we can just do questions, we can chit chat. I know that you guys have toured other places too, so I imagine there's a lot of connections you guys are making. So that's cool, and you could share that too. Floor's open.
So your precepts are wonderful. I love the optimistic resilience.
Yeah.
That's a good one. And social justice. Do you get, for lack of a better word, converts, like Western people who come here and want to become Sikh? Is that pretty common? Or?
Yeah, not necessarily here,
I
but
think New Mexico.
New Mexico is a big,
It's like American Sikh population. And a lot of them still have like turban and everything, and follow the 5Ks if they want, so long hair. But I think there's a large population. In Mexico.
and so Sikhi isn't an ethnic religion in the sense of you need to know all of the cultural aspects. Like let's say Hinduism might be a little bit more difficult to adopt because of the cultural aspects. So that's kind of considered an ethnic religion, but Sikhi is not really, in the sense that you can be from any background. I mean, really, you could be any background for any religion, but particularly Sikh, you don't need to be Punjabi.
We don't have a conversion.
Yeah, I would say that.
You can
There's not like a process.
You can follow
if you have,
Sikhi,
yeah.
not being Sikh.
Yeah, we also don't really. I feel like it's not really.
There's not like you have to
conversion's
be
never really a
baptized.
goal
Yeah.
either for the religion. I would say it's very much like your own journey, and if people want to also go on their own journey, like that's great.
Yeah, we don't proselytize, I think is the word, where you like try to gain followers. People just come. Food brings people.
It brings people together.
Somebody on Zoom asked, where did the word Sikh come from?
Yeah. So I guess if you mean like language, it would be Punjabi, but kind of like my dad just mentioned, Sikh means learner in Punjabi. And I think that was intentional for Guru Nanak Dev Ji to say that we are Sikh, we are learners. Like we're talking about this conversation of it's about a journey, it's about a process. So I don't know the exact origin, but I would imagine it's something along the lines like that.
Especially with Guru being a teacher, like this is, we're following the teacher, so we're the learners kind of.
I have a question. I thought I had heard somewhere that a person's last name, or a person may adopt the last name of Singh at a certain point in their studies. Could you talk a little bit about that?
So a lot of you'll see people with last names Singh or Kaur. That's another sort of identifier.
Or is the other side.
Kaur is for women usually, and Singh is usually for men. And a lot of times, that's at birth. A lot of us, people that have immigrated, have chosen to keep that as the middle name. So all of us have Kaur as our middle name, and the men have Singh. So Singh means king.
Singh came from lion. Lion was called Singh in Farsi, Iranian language. That's where the word came from. And when Guru Gobind Singh, 10th Guru, baptized Sikhs, that's when he said, okay, these my Sikhs, my learners are Singh now. So then same time, ladies, they give name Kaur. Kaur was like a princess.
No.
Lioness, a princess.
So we kind of use them interchangeably.
In both, it was used in both terms, more like because he said these all ladies are my daughters. Yeah. Like princesses, like lionesses, because
In the cultural context of that was not only to unite people, because this is after they've fought like a dozen wars. Morale is low. You have to rally the troops. It unifies people, but at the same time, last names are a signifier of caste. So I have a last name Seerha, and that means that we're Rangaria, which means we're masons. It doesn't really exist anymore, but like machinery work, right? And he wanted to get away from that because he was realizing that even though the first guru, said no more casteism, you could easily tell what caste you are by your last name. So he decided to just form like blank slate it where everybody has the same last name. But Akom is right, when you kind of immigrate here, there's like processes, and it's like, oh my God, well, there's 2 million Sikhs.
Yeah.
So we kept my dad chose to have our middle name is
what happened is, I used to get a call from police and say, oh, is this person related to you, Singh? So that's when, people start using their last name, but a last name for a Sikh person was a Singh or God. But then they started using their caste name, so separate them from. All things are not related to each other by any mean, but religion. They're all related by religion.
Isn't Singh a fairly common Hindu last name in India?
In a certain area.
Yeah.
There's a couple of areas where the Singhs are in Hindus,
Okay.
but not all over India.
Okay.
Yeah, like Rajasthan, a lot of people have the last name Singh, and I think it's just because people immigrated from Punjab maybe and just had that last name and it continued.
Right, someone was probably.
Singh is not exclusive to Sikhs in the sense that no one else can have it. It was a word before we adopted it too. So I'm sure somebody probably just had it too.
Because I have known a number of people with the last name Singh who are Hindu.
Yeah, and they might be Punjabi Hindu too. Could be a cultural thing as well.
Within, we asked what's the experience of a child
within
Sikh?
Punjab, are Sikhs still a minority or are
Non-Punjab,
Sikhs
but in
a
India,
majority? In Punjab as such though, are most people Sikhs?
Yes.
Yeah, and
At least 70%.
yeah, and even if they're not Sikh, they still will regularly go to gurdwaras, as it is like a cultural thing to go to a gurdwara. But you said your question was what's
What's the experience of a child as a Sikh?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. We just did it.
it looks different. I guess it looks different for everyone. I would say there's such a spectrum also, because I know some children are baptized.
Yeah.
And those are probably, I would say, people that are more orthodox, whereas I guess for us, our parents, kind of left that up to us whether we chose to get baptized. So for us, I mean, it looked like, coming here every Sunday and like hanging out with each other, and also kind of forming that sense of community, I think. And I don't know, I've always found in the religion that, the cultural and religious components are very intertwined. So a lot of like our community, even outside of religious occasions like weddings and stuff, and like even like parties and stuff like that, but kind of becomes your community, your friends, your family. So you end up kind of just doing everything together. So this is obviously a part of it. It's just coming to the Sunday program and that religious aspect. We also took classes here at the Gurdwara to learn more about the language, so Punjabi, and then also to do the shabuds, like what you saw people singing, and some history as well.
You've mentioned baptism a few times here. Could you talk a little bit about what does baptism mean within Sikh? And also, you use the word Sikhi. So Sikh, what's
Sure. Sikhism as a noun, as a person, but then Sikhi is equivalent to Sikhism. So instead of saying like Christianity, we say Sikhi. So there's a Christian, there's a Sikh, and then Christianity, Sikhi. Yeah. So baptism is, in Punjabi, it's like Amrit Shakna, and that means taking Amrit. And Amrit is nectar. So that nectar is essentially, what were like God's words, the truth that you're taking when you're making it sound like you're drinking the Kool-Aid. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to make it like that. But it's in that sense that you are taking on that responsibility. You do drink water during the process, but I think I'll let my dad speak more to the process itself. But the reason why we keep on saying it's a choice is because to be a Sikh, this is what a Sikh is. These are the guidelines you have to follow. You don't have to be baptized. But it is something that you can choose to do, or a family might choose to do. So your parents baptize you as a child, and there's certain responsibilities you have when you do that you don't otherwise have to uphold. No one's actually watching you if you do it or not, but it's that oath that you've kind of taken. So I'll let you talk more about the process and the responsibilities.
Yeah, the Sikh doesn't have to be baptized, but when person is ready themselves, that's when they baptize. But it's done by 5 people, 5 who are following Sikhi and who are already baptized. They will do some 5 prayers, and they will add water and sweet. It's like a sugar patase.
It's like sugar.
Yeah, it's kind of a sugar, but it mixes and read that those all 5 prayers while they are mixing that water. Then that bowl is given to all of the people who wants to take Amrit, who wants to baptize from the same bowl. They are all equal. They are all same. So that's the kind of process that goes through person with that. It takes about a couple hours.
So sometimes it be children, sometimes it would be adults.
It could be from like a 6-year-old to 80-year-old.
Yeah, and
It's anytime you are ready yourself. You say, I want to take Amrit.
right.
That's when.
And what I meant by responsibilities is that there are 5 daily prayers to do, and that you're expected to do those daily prayers. You're expected to wear the 5Ks. You're expected to, engage with your community and to live by these principles and teachings. It's not kind of like a do it and you're done. It's more like that's the start. So it's not ending.
You have the dagger?
I don't. I haven't taken Amrit, but both of my
That's
parents
part of
have.
it, right?
Yeah.
Women do.
Yeah, my mom has a Gurban. So my mom is, I think, the only turban.
The one came up.
The one that came up and was like,
Yellow.
the one in yellow, that's my mom. Yeah, so both my parents are baptized, so my mom does as well. So she upholds those responsibilities. And like we mentioned earlier, it's the same. Everybody has to, it's not like women do different things. But what I wanted to talk about, just for context, of this equality component of when you said everyone drinks from the same bowl, that might be like, oh, that's weird. But it's this idea that back when Sikhi first started, there was a concept of like, if this low caste person or if this poor person is walking in my shadow, I need to like bathe. Like that's how stark differences were at the time. So to be sitting together on the floor all together, or to drink from the same bowl, that's a big deal to a lot of, or at the time, that was a big deal, because you couldn't even like be in someone's presence if you were poor. If there was a person rich enough in the room, you couldn't even be there. So this is really like, at the time, groundbreaking. Now it's kind of like, oh, whatever, we'll see. But it was groundbreaking at the time for sure.
Somebody wants to know, is your use of the word baptism a translation of another word from Punjabi?
Yeah. Amrit Shakana would be to take the Amrit. So it would be that.
Right, so we don't use baptism, we use taking Amrit, or like she said, so we don't use baptism, that's just our translation for you guys, but that is that.
The map that you showed the immigration that has occurred, and I'm wondering, is that primarily related to religious oppression, or like is it a lot related to that?
I would say after 1984 it was. So in 1984, there was a government operation, several of them to kill Sikhs. It was a political operation for sure. Indira Gandhi did not like Sikhs, so she on the side was low-key killing people. So there during the 80s, women were like mysteriously like taken in streets and transported to other places. Men just up and up disappeared. Sikh men were just gone. And there's actually an Instagram account that I follow, and it just shares a picture every day of one person who's been taken. And it's like where they were last found. It's like, oh, they were working in their fields. They were walking home from school or something. And women were raped a lot so that they can't be married, or that they're literally so traumatized that they can't continue living. So after 1984, I would say is probably a big spike in immigration to leave because of religious oppression. But prior to that, I think a lot of Sikhs lived in villages. So probably not. That was more of an economic thing. A lot of Sikhs immigrated to California to become farmers there in the late 1800s. I think that's when it started.
I would say it's mostly an opportunity kind of thing. I would say that's what my parents would say. My mom always says, like, well, we're a minority in India, but obviously we're also a minority in the U.S. So I think the scale of religious oppression is arguably different, but I think the main reason would probably be economic opportunity for at least my parents being the first generation that immigrated. It changes depending on which generation as well.
As Sikhi has spread out, particularly in North America, often religions make adaptations to the new cultures they're in. Is that happening with Sikhi within the U.S.?
No. You're trying to say like when they came to America, where they're changing,
or even now, as it's going on, as you're another generation.
Right.
I think no, in the sense of the actual teachings. There's a strong component of you can't change it because we could never know as much as a guru. We could never know as much as a saint.
I'm thinking more in terms of ritual and organization.
Well, probably not, but I would say organization.
I would also say that, like, how we've talked about, the religion is very much about equality and stuff, but there's a large cultural and traditional component that can sometimes, I would say, interfere with some of the teachings and the ground principles. So I like to think that, younger generations are trying to sort of undo that and go back to, I would say, more pure almost of a form of the religion, and try to get rid of like the cultural, like the casteism and stuff that can sometimes play a role just because, our parents were raised in India where it's more of an influence. So I would say in ways like that, yeah. And also I think people are kind of finding ways to be able to more easily, I would say, kind of bring religion into their life and be able to practice it. So I know that I think practicality is also becoming more important for younger people. So, what does that look like? Maybe it doesn't make sense for some people to get baptized if they still want to be sick. So maybe, like just kind of, I would say just the flexibility thing is big.
It might even just be more of a freedom thing with that. Right. If I was in India, maybe those cultural pressures would have been stronger for me to make certain choices versus what I'm doing now. I don't know what that would have been, but...
Well, like, even, like, my grandma, she is baptized as well, but, she was not able to be educated, and she was married very young, so, that looks very different compared to us who have access to education and stuff like that. So I think all those things influence it, but I think the core remains the same. Yes.
My question is kind of that same thing where, say, the dating, courtship, and marriage practices would be well more into the cultural aspect than the religious philosophy. And, in Punjab, historically, did they have the same sort of system of arranged marriages and the boys and girls not, as at a certain age, boys and girls are kept separate from each other?
I wouldn't say they're like intentionally kept separate. The way my mom tries to describe it is everything was super practical.
typical. Like, you did not have time in your day to just be like hanging out. You have with boys, you're doing things because, you know, living in most Punjabi Sikhs, I would say, their roots are in villages. And in a village, you're always doing something. My mom was saying, like, you never sit and just do nothing. There's always something to be done. Like, you need to take care of the farm, or you need to do this, you need to clean. And weddings take a whole lot, like, there's so much to do there. So it's you were always very busy, but in that sense of, does it follow a similar courtship or marriage kind of process? I would say so, in the sense of it was like a union of two families. In older times, there was less of a say of like, oh, well, I don't like this person, please no. It was more so your parents making decisions for you, but even my parents, like, my mom said no to a bunch of people before my dad, and like, they like talked before they got married. Theirs was arranged, but your parents did not.
Our parents were love marriage, but I think it is mostly cultural. I think also, though, keep in mind the expectation was different. Like, at the time, it was very common practice if you're a woman who just got married, you would move in with your in-laws. So I think all of that stuff kind of influences as well. It's like, it makes more sense then. Maybe you do need an arranged marriage. You know, hopefully you want your, you know, husband's family to like you if you're going to be living with them. So I think it just looks very different. And also, again, like, it was within Punjab, within the village. So that's another thing I know you brought up a little bit. Like, I guess, like, is it common maybe like to marry other Sikhs? Like, at the time, if you were in a village, most of your options were also Punjabi Sikhs, and your family maybe would also want that. So I think those are things that our generation is kind of figuring out and kind of, you know, seeing what works for us, what doesn't. But I think a lot of it is just so different because of where we grew up compared to, you know, where our parents and grandparents grew up.
Right, and nowadays arranged marriage is more like a choice. We do, like, for our generation especially, people do have a choice. Like, they can decide that they want to follow how their parents did or how grandparents did and have an arranged marriage. And it's definitely easier in Western countries if you want to marry a Sikh or an Indian person, so to do arranged. So a lot of people do choose it nowadays. It's definitely more flexible.
Is that an issue similar to, I know the Jewish community struggles to maintain a Jewish identity for their children, and part of that becomes the secret wish that they will marry another Jewish person. Because, you know, the big fear there is not, you know, not being exterminated through persecution, but basically just being assimilated out of it.
For sure. I think you can ask our parents. Our parents probably say that they would hope that we would marry somebody or choose to be with somebody who is also Punjabi Sikh. I think it's also a cultural thing. My mom talks about how she loves speaking Punjabi and doing things like that. So it's like that cultural aspect of wanting to maintain and not assimilate, I think totally is there as well. Especially in America, I think there's already an assumed level of assimilation because the norm tends to be like Christian values. We even see that trickling into government, right? So it's like, I think that's definitely a concern,
But another reason could also just be like, especially here, people do feel like more understood with another Sikh Punjabi person. So oftentimes that is also a reason why they will want to marry another Sikh. And so it is more like an understanding as well. So they know how we both lived in America, and so we share the same struggles and things like that.
How much is there a push to get more Sikhs, like we would call it evangelization? Do you try to offer Sikhism to others, or you just
offer it in a sense of like if somebody asked, for sure, but we do not like proselytize. We're not trying to gain more people. The goal is not to have like as many people, or even in Sikhi there is a Gurbani line that says every religion is the right religion. And that's kind of almost a little confusing. My brother and I had a debate on that. We're like, wait, then why are we Sikh or they're not? And then why aren't we all just the same? And like, but the point is that everybody's on the path that is right for them. So maybe I wouldn't learn, for example, I see it as maybe I wouldn't learn the life lessons I needed to if I was a different religion. So maybe I'm meant to be Sikh. But we're not trying to gain more We're not trying to bash on other religions here. Everybody is doing what they're supposed to be doing.
We're all on our path together.
All on our path. And as long as it's about living truthfully, I think that's all that matters.
But I would say also like how we have sort of like an open community mindset and like open, you know, services or like program. I think that we're not really exclusive either. So it's like open to people who choose to practice Sikhi, but it's not ever something I think that is a priority for people who practice, is to get more people. But I think also though, like living in America, it feels good to be able to teach like your friends and stuff about your religion. So I wouldn't say it's like a conversion thing, but
It's
I
more
think,
like an education.
yeah, and it's nice to have people in your life that understand, you know, something that's important to you. So.
Do you wear the head covering or anything when you're out and about?
I don't, but if you're baptized, you are expected to.
And that's where the turban comes in play
I don't
too.
have
Some people will wear that outside then, but we choose not to. So
So you wear a regular dress when you go to school, right?
Yeah. And even today, like sometimes I'll come to Gurdwara in jeans or something, you know, like yeah. I'll try to usually dress modestly, but there's not really an expectation.
You talked about marriage and courtship. Are there expectations about family structure or about children and how many? Can somebody be single or is it,
Or divorce.
Or divorce?
Well,
Any of that stuff.
the idea, and also if you wanted to sit here too, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure you feel comfortable. But yeah, there in Sikhi, there is no Sikh doctrine that dictates how anything should be happened like that, besides the actual marriage, the lama, which is when you go, you kind of make a commitment in front of the Guru Granth Sahib Ji. You're like, I'm gonna be truthful with this person, and I'm going to live via your words. That's kind of the only thing, but the Sikh gurus encouraged marriage in the sense of a lot of times when Sikhi was first created, people would go into like a hermitage and be like, I am living God's name, and I'm going to do it alone, and I'm not going to be in society. So the gurus wanted to make clear that they wanted people to have balance in their life, that you can live by God's words, but you don't need to be a hermit while doing it. You need to be an active member of society, and this whole like Kirtana concept of giving back to your community financially or via time. So I think in that way, that's the only thing that really dictates how a marriage should happen. If you're a productive member of society, maybe you should be single. And I don't know how divorce would even work.
I know.
But I mean, legally, I know people who are sick who got divorced.
And I would say, and going off that, I would say it's very similar stigma that you see everywhere, you know, like we are still grappling with the patriarchy, we are still grappling with stigma against, you know, divorced people, single moms. So I think that stuff is still there, of course, where like traditions can still have an influence in how people are living, but it's not ever like written or anything.
yeah, but those are cultural traditions. There's nothing
Yeah, same-sex marriage, gay, lesbian,
Yeah, so there is no doctrine that says anything about that either. And there are a lot of LGBTQ plus Sikh scholars. I follow a couple on Instagram. They literally have done research on this, and there is no doctrine that says anything about it. And in fact, there is a Sakhi, which is like a story of Guru Nanak Dev Ji went to, I don't even know where he was. He traveled all over the region, like went to Egypt as well. So there are some Sikhs in Egypt because Guru Nanak Dev Ji was there. And he went somewhere and he had like a good relationship with a transgender individual. And I forgot what the word was that they, in Punjabi, it translates to like cross-dressing, but I think it's what modern day we would know as a transgender individual. And he had like a fruitful relationship with that person. Like they chatted, they talked, they were friends. And a lot of people take that as an indication that Guru Nanak Dev Ji did not care as long as you were living your truth. I think culturally, people will say different things. They'll be like, it's the same barriers, right? Of like, that's not the norm or whatever. So culturally, people are strict. And there might be some like auntie listening to what I'm saying and being like, she's saying the wrong things, but and that might be a cultural aspect, but I have seen and I trust people who've done that research and they're like, there is nothing against it. So
It makes sense too. I mean, you talk about like principles of equality and stuff, and how the focus isn't necessarily like if there's no doctrine on it, like it obviously wasn't that important. Like,
and
it
some
wasn't
people are like,
the
oh, well,
most
maybe
part.
it didn't exist, or that's why he didn't talk about it. But if he's all-knowing, he would have written about
Right,
it.
so therefore.
And that's what a lot of people debate about, is that he wrote it there, intentionally what the gurus left out was for a purpose as well. That's what I say, is if he left it out, there's a reason he left it out. If he's included it, there's a reason. That's my take.
Curious if you're comfortable sharing as women with an Indian ancestry, have you experienced racism in America?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's mostly because of our skin color though, because we don't dress like this outside often, but people with turbans, people who have the 5Ks, they will experience more racism than what we have, but yeah, we all,
I think it's also institutional, right? Where it's ingrained into our society in a way that we don't even understand white supremacy as it plays sometimes in these small interactions. So that's why I would say yes. But like, has someone like shouted at my face? Probably no. Not that I can recall, but I think it is like an institutional thing. Systemic within our society as well as our actual governmental policies.
I would also say a lot of what we face with is ignorance, probably just because of how small a population we are. Our names look different, that stands out. People might assume we're Muslim, they might assume we're Hindu. You know, people have been like, oh, like, I'm sure you don't eat beef. And I'm like, actually, yes, but not because of what you think. Like, I just don't like how it tastes. So stuff like that, I think, is, you know, and like also hate crimes. A lot of hate crimes that have been against Sikhs are by ignorant people who thought they were Muslims, which obviously still isn't okay, but it's like almost like we're not known enough to even have necessarily targeted almost,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, I mean, these days, they're just like,
we're just kind of lumped in as other, and so that obviously causes an issue, but it's harder to be targeted because most people don't know our residents.
yeah. And then we often get lumped with Islamophobia.
Right.
So that is where most of our racism,
especially turbans, you know, members of our community who choose to wear turbans, people will assume they're Muslim. There was a large rise in hate crimes after 9/11, of course, which was, you know, just like 10, 15 years after my parents immigrated, like a little bit more for you. So that stuff obviously affected it, but we're hoping, like, you know, education and people are learning more Instagram and stuff, so.
Yeah. Are there any dietary restrictions?
that is debated in the sense of some people, so there's in the Guru Granth Sahib Ji, so some people believe that if it's not written in the Guru Granth Sahib Ji, I don't have to do it. So nowhere in there does it say you have to be anything dietary wise. But there are some cultural practices in a different way of like maybe a saint not written in the book but said we shouldn't eat egg. So that's one big one, and this is somewhere where like again like people might be like she's saying like all these wrong things because my parents don't eat egg, they're vegetarian and they don't eat egg because they believe that's what that should happen. But I know other baptized people that eat meat, they eat everything because and their reason for it is that it's not written in the Guru Granth Sahib Ji, and Guru Gobind Singh Ji was an avid hunter. I mean he was like fighting wars, he needed to like stuff.
I would say anything that it is usually for people who are baptized. So my grandma's baptized, it's no alcohol, no meat. But before she was baptized, she did. So I think that's, if there is any dietary restrictions, it's more commonly followed by people who are baptized. But within the broader community, I would say it's very open. But you'll notice like at Gurdwara, they don't serve meat. I would say just because there's a decent amount of people who don't eat
and that's just like out of respect too for any individual who comes here. They if they pick up something, they're like they don't have to ask, does this have egg in it? And just nothing has egg, nothing has meat.
Yeah. But like weddings, you'll see like butter chicken.
Right.
So of course, yeah.
The cake.
Yeah, the cake has egg in it usually.
You talked about gurus fighting the wars.
Yeah.
And there's also a strong emphasis within Sikhi about being peace.
Yeah.
How do you hold those two together?
That's such an interesting concept, and I'm so glad you brought that up. There's this concept we call Sant Sipahi. So Sipahi means soldier, and Sant means saint. So it's this concept of how do you be a saint warrior at the same time. So that's definitely this idea of balance coming back in, where you have to balance this idea of how do I fight for the values I want, but also do it in a peaceful manner. So obviously, like, the gurus tried to just talk with the emperors, but they were very aggressive. I think Guru Harai, which is the seventh guru, it was either his like son or it was like the guru before him, Guru Hargobind Ji, the sixth guru. They're like really
They're next to each other. I don't know what
next to each other. No, but they had like fruitful relationships. Like I think Emperor Akbar, he was like very calm, and he respected other people's religions. In fact, his wife was Hindu and he was Muslim, and he was okay with that. He let her practice anything she wanted. So my point is that they tried to do it in a peaceful manner because of the sunspy concept, where they wanted to be peaceful and extend the hand of friendship first, because that's what is best practice. But when that doesn't work, you do have to pick up the sword and fight for your own.
I would say a lot of the focus is on defense more than kind of being the aggressor. So even like my last name means like defensive sword, you know what I mean? And a lot of Sikhs are originally like warriors. You know what I mean? There's a lot of Sikhs fight in the army for India and stuff. So I think there's more of a focus on being able to defend yourself and your values of people, but not like harming others and being the aggressor, I would say.
And obviously that's easier said than done. Right? It's that's why the Sansafai concept exists, because you do have to be conscious of what that means and actively think about that.
Yeah, it's the same question as how far is too much. Like, when do I need to start becoming violent? It's that same question, yeah.
So upstairs goes till about what time?
It's
1:30. He said 1:45, but I really feel like it's gonna go till like 2 maybe.
And then people eat after, or you said at any time? Or?
Yeah, so we mentioned today's group board, but I also wanted to bring up, like, we don't just celebrate, when they were killed. Like, we usually have group boards for birthdays and gurus, and then also something like this that is important to recognize, like
Right.
Yeah.
So for today, we have longer.
Throughout, but usually it's done right after, but that's also because it's usually shorter. So I think out of respect for people being hungry, it's more throughout today.
Yeah. Is the ceremony upstairs, for lack of better language, like a church service where there's an opening and a sequence and an end? Or is it?
So that sequence that I said of Kirtan and then Sai Ardas and then Langar, that happens every week. And in fact, in Gurdwaras in India, that happens every day, where they will do that in the morning. So when I was talking about the living Guru, we do treat the Guru Granth Sahib Ji as a king. We will wake the king up from his bed and bring him out. So in India, when a king wakes up, he goes to his throne and he sits there all day and does king things. So that's kind of what we do for the Guru Granth Sahib Ji. We'll pull him out of that room that you saw, that side room that I was pointed at towards the left, and we bring him out. He sits on his throne and is there, and then you put the Guru Granth Sahib Ji to bed. And even the words that we use are very humanizing, because we want to emphasize that just like you follow a living Guru, you have to follow this Guru Granth Sahib Ji. Because it's very easy to be like, well, this is just a book. But it's not just a book, it's a compilation of so much.
Is that available in translation to English?
Yes, you can look it up.
It's on audible.com. That's what we were sent a really fun video if you didn't watch it. And at the end it's sponsored by audible.com. And he said that you can actually get the entire thing.
Wow. Yeah, you can look it up. So if you want to get like a smaller version of the Guru Granth Sahib Ji, you can get it in sections. So I have a Gurkha, which just means like a small book. And it's of the 5 prayers that you're supposed to do every day. and I have it in Gurmukhi, so the script you saw upstairs. It's in Romanized English, which means like it's how you say it, but with English letters, and then it has a translation as well. Because I can't read Gurmukhi that fast.
Is there an app for that?
Yes, it's called iGurbani, and I'm not even joking. It's literally called iGurbani. There's another one for the Gurkha. I can't remember what it's called. I don't know if I even have that. Oh, Sikhi to the Max is an application you put on your computer. I know, they're so funny. These are like IT guys that like had like free time and they're like, we're gonna create an app. So that is what they use upstairs to like show real-time translations. Because a lot of our community like speaks Punjabi or doesn't speak Punjabi or can't read it but understands it or some people don't do any. So they have the translations. They try to do them real time so that you can engage at the same time.
So the programming upstairs has already started and just continues?
Yeah, so we're at this part, the first thing that says Kirtan, that's people singing, and that is something I would say compared to the rest, like has some variation Sunday to Sunday. So like you were saying earlier, Simran, like today's is going to focus on the guru that we're recognizing, but those can change each time, and you know, maybe people have a favorite and they do the same shuffle every time, whatever it is. So that part has more variation, whereas the other stuff is more structured, like part of every Sunday service.
Yeah, and they'll make Kirtan longer, shorter, depending on like, okay, there's a lot of, Sangat is the community, that just means community. There's a lot of Sangat today. They might extend the Kirtan because people come to listen to Kirtan and just like
people come at different times.
Right, it's not a beginning thing, you have to be there at the start and then leave at the end, it's like a
Come and go.
Yeah.
And in India, is it there like one day a week that the accent's the same thing? Is it every day?
Every
Do
day.
you adopt Sundays because you're in America?
Yeah. It's like everyone has Sundays off.
So might as well.
I mean, I know like in Chicago they do a little bit more.
Toronto's like twice a week they have a service.
Yeah. In New York they do 2 times in one day. They start like their program at 3 o'clock as well.
Right. Well, and also like there are some components that have to be done every day. It's just whether there's
The waking up, the going to sleep.
See it. So if they have community coming, then maybe they'll put some kirtan too, so people have more to stay for. But otherwise, like you can come like sometimes if it's an important day, like maybe it's one of our birthdays or something, our family will stop by just to like pay our respects and God. So you can really come whenever and.
It's an open concept in the sense of, just like I said, there's no formal priest position. Like, yeah, this is where some of the priests will sleep, but this is not like, I mean, it's obviously their room, but it's not like their room of like, there's no ownership in that kind of sense, and it's not like their kitchen or this, that. There are like things that are for practicality, but anybody can take ownership of the Gurdwara. It's supposed to just be an open concept. You can come whenever you want, leave whenever you want. There's always food. You can eat the food. It's not like, oh, I have to replace what I put there. It's like, do your part, like wash your dishes, be a good community member, blah, blah, blah.
And that's another thing is like, if you look, there's like a whiteboard over there, so families will often take turns picking a day to be responsible for the food, and a lot of times like your closer community members will come and help you out, so it's not like the burden falls all on one family there. So we try to also rotate that responsibility to make sure that it's always.
Yeah, and there's like not like a fund that runs the Gurdwara either. You might see people like giving money upstairs.
Oh.
So like sometimes you can like, I mean, when I come, every time I just put $1 in, so that it's like, oh, like I'm helping out a little bit in some kind of way.
And that's usually normal is $1.
Like $1. Like sometimes if it's like your kid's birthday, you might donate $200 to Gurdwara or something. They also give money to the priests that are singing, so you might see they give money to the priests. There's like a little bucket in front of them to be like, wow, like I really loved that you sang it in that way, or you picked that line, like that really spoke to me, because they're kind of just here, like.
So it's a tip jar.
Kind of. Kind of is. Yeah, it's a little awkward, but it's like, yeah, it is.
And they don't like split it up.
Between
the
the
ones
two.
that right.
It's not like, so like I do
I
Kirtan
got
too,
one,
but like
yeah.
I'm not gonna get money because I'm just like a volunteer.
So are the priests volunteers who do something else for a living, or
They
is your
can.
anyone this is their whole job?
They can, but these two do. Well, the person who plays tabla, which are the two little drums, he also is a cook. He makes
He's really
the
good.
most delicious food, actually.
There's a restaurant. We should. What restaurant is it? He's the head cook at one of the restaurants around here.
Yeah, I don't know which one. He just switched his job.
Yeah, he just.
He used to work on the one on.
Yeah, he wants to open his own restaurant someday. So stay tuned.
Yeah. So he does, but the main priest doesn't.
Yeah. And a lot of times, people who are priests might be like very newly immigrated, and their family might be coming over eventually, but right now they're here by themselves. So like, this is
the job they'll just take up until they're like waiting for visa stuff.
Right. And so they're here first. So this is a good way for them to make a community and also like give back to their community and do something that they love to. So.
And it's easy for language barriers. Like if they don't know English yet, this is a quick something they can get onto first.
Yeah. And there's always people coming in and out.
And how many people in the community? I know you said there's no membership, but about how many people?
Like the Punjabi community is like 100 families. It's like, and we're talking like I said, like Beaver Dam is like how it sounds big. Like the Middleton area, just like 20 people. Like Madison, it's like 50, and then the greater region is like 100. I really feel like my dad threw out the number 150.
And
it's growing so much. While we were in college, like I was like, I come home and I'm like, there's a whole new.
When we were kids, it was just in a house. It was just there was a house.
Oh yeah, there was a house here.
And we used to just like hang out in the basement and like it's just a very small like one room. It's definitely grown a lot. I think especially with the university, like we have a lot of maybe like college kids who come by and they find a sense of community here, so they come more often. A lot of newer families that have immigrated, But like the closest, the closest Gurdwara otherwise is like Oak Creek, Chicago, and some other, and those are bigger ones as well. Brookfield and Oak Creek I think are bigger. I would say Milwaukee and Chicago have probably a bigger population. So like sometimes we could even go to the Oak Creek one if we wanted or something.
Are there any questions in the chat?
No, but a lot of people expressing their appreciation.
Thanks for coming.
I'm curious whether there are any Punjabi Sikhs in Pakistan or.
I would say yes. So the partition was like maybe you'll notice on the map, Punjab is the topmost part of India. Like my grandma crossed the border, she was pretty much in Pakistan otherwise until the partition. So it's all very recent history.
Half in Pakistan.
And there still is a Punjab in Pakistan. So like some people get confused by that. Like ethnically we are all the same people. Yeah.
So there are Punjabi Pakistanis too. They speak Punjabi, they literally do everything the same.
Right, the language.
But they're just in Pakistan.
And they do include Sikhs.
Yeah.
So Lahore actually is where Guru Nanak Dev Ji did a lot of his work. So there's a huge Gurdwara in Lahore for Guru Nanak Dev Ji. Lahore is in Pakistan. That's the capital of their Punjab. Somebody just raised the volume.
The doors, I know. But like when the partition happened,
they raised the volume when they want people to come
upstairs. when the partition happened, like it was expected that if you were Muslim, you stayed in Pakistan if you wanted to move. So I think that's why you'll find most Sikhs still call Punjab India their home, but there's definitely obviously a population in Pakistan as well. But the history is all very recent, which is wild to think. But
and some people think it's like a political motive too, to split up Punjabi people because they fought so many wars and they're like, oh my god, what if they try to fight another one?
Yeah.
And so some people think it's political, some people think it's more religious persecution because they split up. Like Muslims and Hindus and Sikhs lived in villages and like were so chill with each other, like they were family. We actually have a book club. Our aged kids are Sikh youth group, and we read a book that kind of discussed that topic of moving across and the slaughter that occurred because there was just so much anger against the British for being there and then splitting it up, and then now they're being told to move. That a lot of Sikhs and Muslims particularly were killed.
And even today, India and Pakistan relations are very tense. And there's just a lot of hurt and pain, I think, obviously around that decision, and even within the communities, like, there's like a lot of tension just between Muslims and non-Muslims because you're associating Muslims with Pakistan, and that caused so much turmoil. So there's still like a lot of history with that is still like felt by I think a lot of people.
go up.
Yeah. Upstairs. So any questions of like, because I always feel bad when people come and they're like, oh my god, I don't know what to do upstairs or like whatever. Is there any questions or do you feel like you need any more info on
I need
logistics?
to leave soon. Is it rude to go up there and then leave?
No, you'll see people are just like literally going in and out.
And you can even sit towards the back if that felt more comfortable. Sometimes people like to wait until the current like song is done playing while they're in transition, but there's no pressure.
Yeah, you can leave whenever you want.
And you just do that then before you come in.
Yeah, and you'll probably see people do it in front of you.
Yeah, and even with like how people are sitting and stuff, you can just look at what everybody else is doing. Like I'm sure also if you ask someone around you, they'll probably.
Or you can just go sit also.
Yeah, you can also sit. Yeah, I think sitting in the back is totally fine too with the chairs. People will sit right in front of the chairs as well. Cool.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We have more to.
We also do. We
tomorrow
have
and
more.
Thank you. Thank you.
Were there a lot on Zoom?
We had 12 people.
Oh wow. Yeah, so feel free to have like another snack. I'm gonna have a snack.
I know.
Yeah.
They really have us eating late.
They're gonna have us eating late. I think longer is also served if you're really hungry as well. But yeah, we're here if you need us. Thanks for coming.
This was wonderful. And we'll know it's all over because everyone will, when we're upstairs.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it'll be obvious.
Yeah.
I'll be running for the food.
Mad rush for the food.
राज करेगा खालसा अभी रह न कोई वार होए सब मिलेंगे बचे शरण जो होए वाहिगुरु नाम जहाज है चढ़े सूतरे पार जो शरदा कर सेव दे गुर पार उतारन हार खंडा जाके हाथ में कलगी सो है शीस सो हमारी रक्षा कर गुर करगी तार जगदीश सो हमारी रक्षा कर गुर करगी तार जगदीश बोले सोनिहा बोले